Hi, so in this brief tutorial we'll have a look at Massive and learn how to layer an FM operator pair, carrier and modulator, with a subtractive part of Massive. So we've essentially got two synths in one. So to do that, we're going to start by calling up a new sound. So I'm going to load a new sound and just test that. Okay, that's working fine. Let's have a look at our routing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use oscillator 1 and oscillator 2 as the subtractive part of this synthesizer. So we're going to send that through filter 1. I'm going to leave the filters in parallel. And here's filter 1, here's filter 2. And I've got my mix so I can listen to the output of filter 1 or the output of filter 2. Okay, that's good. And I'll just pop a low pass filter in each of these slots here. And then we're proceeding on to the output. And I'm noticing that I've got envelope 4 on the final output. Okay, so that's fine. What about our FM section? Well, for that, I'm going to use oscillator 3, and that's going to become the carrier. So I'm going to send that into filter 2. So now oscillator 3 is going to come into filter 2, make sure that the output of filter 2 is up. And then when I want to hear the FM side, I can just pull my mix down here. That way I'm listening to all of the FM side coming from these two, this little section here, the modulator and the carrier. I can push this up here and listen to my two subtractive oscillators going through this filter number 1. Okay, let's listen to the FM side first of all, get that set up. Okay, so first thing, I want my carrier to be a sine wave. That's very important. So let's put a sine wave on here, otherwise you just won't be able to tell what's happening. Let's just turn that to a sine wave and make sure we can hear that. There we go. And is that coming through filter 2? Yes, I think so. We want to make sure that filter 2 is opened right up as well. Turn the resonance down. So first of all, we're just hearing the effects of our FM setup over here. Let's check that. Yeah, okay, that sounds good. Okay, now we want a modulator. Well, to turn this modulation oscillator into a modulator for oscillator 3, we're going to select phase modulation, and we're going to put it on oscillator 3. To all intents and purposes, phase modulation sounds like FM modulation, and indeed, in many synths, they were called FM, and actually they were phase modulation. Okay, let's turn on the modulating oscillator, turn the amount. This is now actually modulation index. I'm turning it down to 0 here. Let's push it up and see what we hear. Now that's a very familiar FM type sound, right? There's a little bit of extra color to it because it is passing through this filter. Okay, what about our ratios? Now usually with ratios in FM, we're looking at harmonics. So in other words, a ratio of 1 to 2 means that the modulator is producing the second harmonic from the fundamental frequency which is being played. Massive deals with frequency in terms of pitch. So what we have here is 0. That is sort of like no change. If, however, I put this to 12, what it means is that this oscillator is playing at 12 semitones above this oscillator. That is exactly 1 octave above. Here is the fundamental, the first harmonic, and this one is playing the second harmonic an octave above. So if I increase the modulation index, we get that familiar sort of clarinet sound because we're missing every other harmonic in the spectrum which is generated. So this is truly an FM system we've got going here. If I push this up to 19, I'm now at the third harmonic. So now we're listening to a ratio of 3 to 1. If I push it up to 24 semitones, that's 2 octaves, that is the fourth harmonic. Okay, so if I had some other interval here, I get the familiar sort of bell-like odd inharmonic tones. I want a sort of percussive sort of sound. It's a typical FM type thing. Before I can get that, I need to put some envelopes on the carrier, which is oscillator 3, and the modulator, which is now this modulation oscillator. So I'm going to take envelope 1, which is free, and I'm going to pop it in this little box here and just pull that down and push this up. So now the amplitude of oscillator 3 is controlled by this envelope. And then I'm going to take operator 2 and do the same with the button which says phase, but it's actually now acting as our modulation index. I'm going to push that up there, some given amount. Okay, so on operator 1, I'm going to adjust that to have a fast attack. I'm going to take the decay down to sort of nothing and put on some release time, so it's sort of a bit like a vibraphone. But I must remember one thing here. This output is coming out of the final output, and the final output is governed by envelope number 4. So I better check that envelope number 4 has some release time. So let me turn off the modulation for the moment, and let's adjust these envelopes. So here's envelope 1. And I think we can hear that sort of hanging on like a sort of vibraphone type instrument. And now I'm going to turn on the modulation oscillator. I'm going to reduce the amount of modulation. You can hear that just sort of kicking in at the beginning of the note. I'm going to speed up the attack on envelope 2. And put a little bit of release on it. So now I have a sort of metallic-y sound. Let's add some velocity sensing and key scaling to both of these envelopes. That will make them a little more playable, a little more responsive to pitch and touch. So there I have my FME side of the equation, and I've got a filter set up here. So if this were a little too bright, or if I feel that I can get a mix of the brightness due to the FM and the brightness due to the filter, I can now play with my filter a little bit, maybe even put some resonance on there. Okay, so we've got a little thing going there. Now if I push my fader up to the top, I'm listening to oscillator 1 and oscillator 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my remaining envelope 3, pop that in here, and let that control the output of oscillator 1. I better open up my filter so I can hear it. Now I've only got one envelope here. I'm going to use the same envelope on the filter. Just use it to there we go. Now I'm going to introduce the same with oscillator 2. I'm going to put envelope 3 in there, use that to modulate this one as well, like that. I'm using sawtooth waves here, by the way. And I'll just turn that on. And now I'm going to put his pitch up. So we've got a little chord going there. Increase the level of this. Okay, and now let's add or rather listen to the FM portion. So I'm noticing the fact that I've got an odd ratio here. It's maybe a little too much. I could having got a rough mix now of my two sounds, subtractive coming from these two guys, output of filter 1, FM coming from these two guys, output from filter 2, and a nice mix between them. And then of course we can sweeten the whole thing up with a little reverb and stuff. Put an ensemble on there, just a little bit. So now we've got a sort of paddy sound, but it's got that interesting tone at the beginning. Okay, so there we go. FM and subtractive from Massive.